There we go. Thank you for joining us. We're recording our webinar tonight, so you can share it with those that maybe didn't join in or you think might be interested. Welcome to Lakes and Legislation, a preview of the 2026 New Hampshire legislative session. I'm just going to go through some quick housekeeping and then we'll turn it over to Andrea for all the interesting stuff. So as you know, this session is being recorded. We do ask that you stay muted for the duration of the webinar, just so we don't have any background noise, so it's easy to hear the presenter, Andrea. We do ask that you leave your cameras off. That also helps with some of the bandwidth in case there's any issues or any distraction as we're presenting. We do have a chat box going. Feel free if you have questions throughout the webinar to put your questions in there. If we're able to stop occasionally, we might take a peek at the chat box. If Andrea's on a roll, we will just try to get out to those questions at the end of this webinar. After we wrap up in the next day or so, we'll send you an evaluation form. We love it when we get your feedback. So please do let us know what you thought of the webinar, if you think we could make any improvements, and especially if you have any ideas for future webinars. I love to see those ideas. Just some quick background on who we are, New Hampshire Lakes. We are a nonprofit organization that is the voice for all of New Hampshire's 1,000 lakes. And we're working to restore and preserve the health of New Hampshire's lakes. We do that through our 3 programs, our advocacy program, which you're going to learn all about tonight, our conservation program, best known for our lake hosts who are out there on the front lines checking boats as they come into and leave our lakes for aquatic invasive species, our Lake Smart program, helping property owners make choices that will help protect our lakes, and our outreach program, which is bringing you information just like this webinar tonight, all free of charge. And you can help support these programs by becoming a supporter. With this gift, you'll join a growing community of people like you who are passionate about the health of our lakes, and you can easily do that right online at that website there. Or if you'd prefer to talk to someone, we usually have someone available by phone. You can call in as well if that's easier for you. We're your hosts this evening. I'm Erin Mastine, the Outreach Manager, and we're joined by Bria Arvidsson, our Director of Programs. And the main event will be presented by Andrea LaMoreaux, our Policy and our President and Policy Advocate. And with that, I will turn it over so we can get to all the good information that we are here for tonight.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Just one housekeeping item. I got a message from one of our board members who's trying to get in and says for some reason they're getting a message that the host has locked the meeting. So I'm not sure if there's a way for you to unlock the meeting.
Maybe that's why we have so few people here.
And I do see it up on my screen now. It does say meeting locked. So
Oh, my
maybe
goodness, why would that
maybe
happen?
Bria can help do some research so we can figure this out.
That's so bizarre.
And I'll just hold off a second here.
Okay, I did just find a setting, but I have no idea how it got turned on. I've just clicked it off.
Okay, awesome. And I no longer see the host is locked meeting notice. So when I've seen I see that we have people joining. So excellent work. Good job troubleshooting. All right,
Good.
and here we go. Well, welcome everyone. I am going to find my screen and share it. Dun, 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 dun. And share. And Erin, can you give me a thumbs up if that looks all right? All
Looks great.
right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm thrilled that you are spending part of your Wednesday evening with me and the rest of my New Hampshire Lakes team. Thank you, Aaron, for hosting this tonight, and then Bria and Sam Parkman, who will be on in just a few minutes, and they're going to be my helpers here tonight. They've been doing this advocacy thing with me, and they'll be doing their best to address questions in the chat. Feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. Bria and Sam are up to speed as to what's going on, and they'll do their best to answer. And then any tricky questions or if you're trying to stump me, we'll address those at the end. This is a jam-packed presentation. I'm going to start off with giving a really high elevation, quick summary of the legislative process. I see we have some folks that are new to the process. I will say that I'm just going to, New Hampshire is a unique process. I'm going to go over it again at a very high elevation, but then you will have all these slides and the recording should you want to really dive down into how the process works. But to set the stage here, the New Hampshire legislature, pretty unique place. We have at least one former New Hampshire legislator on the call tonight, Dan Wolf, served in the legislature in the House of Reps for a very long time. So we have, I'm told, the third largest legislative body in the English-speaking world with 400 reps and 24 Senate members. The session is really a 2-year biennium. 2026, we're in the second year of the biennium. The first year, 2025, a lot of state budget type issues were discussed. And now this session, it's more policy stuff that doesn't necessarily impact the state budget. Who's in the legislature? Let's see. So it is, again, 400 reps, leaning towards the Republican majority. In the Senate, same, leaning towards they have a super majority there in the Senate. And for the trivia question, about approximately 1,100 bills will be considered during this session. And here's the process. Some of you remember that old cartoon, how I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, how a bill becomes a law. This is kind of a nice diagram from our partners at New Futures. I'm just going to very quickly highlight this process. To get a bill, if you have an idea for a bill, you would have a representative or a senator. You would speak with them, usually over the summer, and get them to sponsor a bill. They would file a request in the fall to the Legislative Service Office, and at this point, then the Legislative Service Office, you give them a title and some information, and then they can work on the bill and get something drafted. And usually right around the holidays, right before Christmas this year, we got all the bills. All the LSRs became bills with bill numbers. And that's when we started compiling our legislative tracking sheet, which if you haven't seen it already, I'll make sure you have a link to it. And so if the bill starts if a senator sponsored it, it starts with an SB. If a House representative sponsored the bill, it starts with an HB. So every bill then at the beginning of January gets assigned to a committee. The House, being a larger body, again with those 400 reps, has many more committees, 26 committees. The Senate, being the smaller body, has about 13 committees. One thing to note, if you have been involved in the legislative process over the years. This year, the House is not meeting in the legislative office buildings. That building is being renovated and upgraded. They are meeting at Granite Place, which is about 1.5 miles away. For those of you who have been to hearings, Granite Place has the parking's much easier. It's a wonderful building. But so the committees of every bill gets assigned to a committee, and here in New Hampshire, pretty unique. Every bill gets a hearing, and the general court, the website is very good about giving us information about when hearings are going to be held. We always know at least a couple days before a hearing, and then we can let folks know about the hearings coming up and maybe take action on it. At the hearing, you are a member of the public. You can speak. You can share your recommendation on if the committee should support it or not support it, and you can share your story or your opinion. If you can't make it to the legislative offices, you can watch these hearings online in real time, or you can watch them after the fact in the recording. So every bill is heard by a committee. And then the committee will meet maybe later that day or sometime in the next couple weeks, and they'll go into what's called executive session, and they will then discuss the bill. So this is after the public hearing, after they've heard all the input at some later point. They will discuss the bill and they will issue a recommendation. There's a variety of recommendations they can issue. I'm not going to go through this, but um, usually, well, today we had a bill that was recommended ought to pass with an amendment. And this bill will also cost money. So this bill will eventually be going to a second committee for consideration, the finance committee, where the money part will be decided. So when a committee makes a recommendation on the bill, whether it's pass or, you know, ITL means inexpedient to legislate, or essentially recommending that the bill not advance, the bill die. Their recommendation would go, if it's a House bill, to the full House. Here's a picture of the full House in session, or if it's a Senate bill, go to the full Senate. And there, the Senate will then, or the House will vote on the committee's recommendation. And some bills do end up being debated on the floor of the Senate or the floor of the House if they're, if there's not consensus, if it's not, if it's more of a controversial. If that body, whatever body it originated, passes the bill, so if the House passes a bill, then it has to go to the Senate, and essentially the same process happens. Um, in this, so that's called crossover, and crossover usually happens beginning of April. And again, those bills that survive the first body go to the second body, but at that point, there's many fewer bills to be heard after crossover, because some bills are not going to make it. They're either going to be voted inexpedient to legislate, or something other that just doesn't advance them. So then another public hearing happens for that bill if it passes. And then say the House passed one version of the bill, the Senate passes another version of that same bill, then they would have to, the first body would have to look at how the bill was amended and see if they agree with the changes. And essentially, at the end of the day, the House and the Senate will need to approve the same version of a bill. If they do, then it would advance to the governor, where then the governor has some choices where she can decide to sign the bill, let become law without signature, or veto the bill. And then there is a process where a governor's veto could be overridden. And I think two sessions ago, there was we successfully got Governor Sununu vetoed a bill on fertilizer. It was a lake-friendly bill about fertilizer, reducing the use of fertilizer, and we got his veto overridden. So it is possible. It's not that common, but it does happen. So that was a really, really quick overview of the process. And I think the important takeaways there are, if you have an idea for a bill, go talk to, your representatives, whether your House members or your Senate members, work with them. And if they think it's a good bill, they will, introduce it. And it will get at least one hearing. And where are we in the process right now? We're in the public hearing process. And actually, the title of this webinar was a preview of the session, but it's already started. And Bria and Sam and I and a few of our board members and a couple of our lake advocates have already been at 6 lake-friendly hearings this week. So it kicked off pretty quickly. And one of our bills actually went to executive session today, which was exciting as well. So thank you all for tuning in today. And if you are on this call, you care about lakes. You may be a supporter of New Hampshire Lakes, part of the New Hampshire Lakes community. This is your advocacy team, myself, Bria, who's on the call, and Sam, who is going to be joining us. We are registered lobbyists. Lobbyist is not a bad word. What this means here in New Hampshire is we just have to track, because we're paid employees of an organization doing work in the legislature. We record the time we spend on different types of advocacy. And in the next slide, you'll learn what kind of advocacy we can actually do. But New Hampshire Lakes, we're a nonprofit organization. We have a board of directors and we have a public policy and advocacy committee. And so what Bria, Sam, and I did this fall and leading up to the holidays is look through there's about 1,200 LSRs that were submitted. We figured out which ones were about lakes, and then we looked at the bills as they came out, and we made recommendations to our public policy and advocacy committee, these folks here. And then we together came up with input from our stakeholders stakeholders, our other lake associations, came up with positions on a variety of bills, and that's what we'll launch into in just a second. So this is your advocacy team. Uh, New Hampshire Lakes, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have, again, 3 registered lobbyists. We do issue advocacy. What that means is we can take positions on bills. We can take positions on issues. We do not take positions on candidates. We don't support candidates. We don't direct money to any political campaign. We don't tell people who to vote for. We don't pay for people's votes. We simply we do work directly with legislators to educate and hopefully inspire them to vote in a lake-friendly way. But that is the extent of it. Um, so, with that, New Hampshire Lakes, what are our core issues? As you can imagine, with the New Hampshire legislature and the 1,100 or so bills, there's a whole bunch of different topics that these bills are addressing in the legislature, from education to criminal justice, um, uh, all sorts of things. We're focusing in on environmental issues and specifically on lake conservation, restoration, and management issues. Really, over the years, we've been doing this work officially since the organization began 30 plus years ago. Our primary areas that we advocate on are shoreland and wetland protection. You know, the sort of the last lines of defense around our lakes. We advocate on water quality restoration and protection. That picture in the middle there, if you haven't seen before, that's a type of cyanobacteria bloom. We advocate on aquatic invasive species prevention and management. And that picture there is a very robust crop of a milfoil in a lake. So, what is in store for our lakes this session? So, we have about 10 or so priority bills that we are advocating on this session. And for those of you who are already signed up to receive our e-newsletters and our advocacy alerts, you will already be somewhat familiar with our legislative agenda. We have a tracking matrix where we keep track of the lake friendly or not so the lake priority bills, and what they are, what they're about. That matrix has links to where you can learn more. That matrix has New Hampshire Lakes' positions, and that matrix also includes what committee is going to hear that bill, when they're going to hear that bill. And then after the committee hears the bill and after we know what the committee is recommending, we update that matrix with positions that the committee takes. So we're continually updating that matrix as the bill advances or doesn't advance through the entire process. So one of the kind of kick it off here with a kind of a fun bill, HB, so House Bill 1020, proclaiming Lake Winnipesaukee the official state lake of New Hampshire. We are supporting that bill, not because Lake Winnipesaukee is our favorite lake. You know, you're welcome to have whatever lake is your favorite lake. We're supporting that bill because this bill, Lake Winnipesaukee, is a great lake. But this bill just helps raise awareness in general about the importance of our lakes, how important our lakes are to our state, our communities, our economy. And also pretty cool, this bill is the idea of a 4th grade class. So pretty neat, feel good bill here, but also an educational opportunity. We haven't seen the date yet for when this bill will be heard, but we will certainly be there and we will let you all know too. And if you have questions on bills, feel free to put them in the chat. And again, the team here will do their best to address it. And if not, we'll address it at the end here. Okay, so another bill. So now we're moving into water quality here. HB, so House Bill 1607, relative to the use and storage of salt. This is a bill that New Hampshire Lakes worked on this past summer with Representative Rosemary Rung. For those of you who know Representative Rung, she is one of the champions or has been one of the champions for lake lake-friendly policy the past several years. She is represented in Merrimack, has a seasonal home on Lake Kennesaca and Molten Borough, so she's intimately aware of lakes. So this bill was actually already heard this week by the House Public Works and Highways. So I was there. I testified. Representative Rung was there. Department of Environmental Service was there. The New Hampshire Department of Transportation was there. What does this bill do? Simple summary, this bill would require the Department of Environmental Services to develop and issue regulations that require salt, and, other de-icing materials that used in the winter to control snow and ice would require proper storage and management practices for those stores of product. This picture here, if you can see this, this is give me a thumbs up if you think it's a lake-friendly way to store salt, or a not so lake-friendly way, thumbs down. Thumbs down. Um, so, what's going to happen here, right? We're going to get snow, we're going to get rain, and we're going to get snow melt, and that rainwater and runoff water is going to wash that salt pile right into that storm drain, and maybe that storm drain goes to a stream, and that stream goes into a lake. This is happening in all different shapes and forms throughout our state. Not lake-friendly ways of storing salt. So this bill would allow the Department of Environmental Services to develop rules and regulations to require, but to not just right now they just recommend best practices for how to store your salt, but this would actually put some teeth behind some regulation. And so this bill was heard, and I would say it. I feel that it was well received by the committee. The committee asked some really great questions, and DES did a wonderful job. While they didn't take a position on the bill, state agencies typically don't take positions on bills. Sometimes they do. But DES laid out a really good discussion of the increasing salt in our lakes and how that's not a good thing for a variety of reasons, and how there is definitely a need to have salt and de-icing products stored in a more lake-friendly way on the landscape. So the next step for this bill, we're waiting to see what the committee is recommending. Again, we made our case. I think it was well received, and we'll keep you posted on that one. Also dealing with salt, and we call this a companion bill to Representative Rung's bill, HB 1810, relative to a road salt fee to support certified winter road maintenance practices. This is a bill from Representative Will Darby. Representative Darby is another champion for lakes over the past couple of years. He is from Nashua and has a seasonal home on Lake Menominee in southern New Hampshire. So this bill was heard, I feel, and again, was heard Monday. Monday. And what this bill would do is establish a fee on the bulk sale of road salt mix, and brine. Brine is a solution of basically a salt solution, a $4 per ton fee on these products sold. And the fee would then be deposited into a brand new road salt mitigation fund. And this fund would then provide grants to state agencies, municipalities, and businesses to implement salt reduction and best practices, and also potentially storage best practices. So we say this is a complementary bill. Of course, when we talked about the previous bill, Representative Rung's bill, they said, would requiring municipalities and contractors to store salt in a lake-friendly way, would that cost money? It could, if, say, a municipality had to build a salt shed or something. This program here, created by 1810, could raise funds to provide grants to the state agencies, to businesses, to towns to implement best practices to reduce salt. So we're waiting to hear what the committee recommends on this bill. And for those of you on the call, many of you have looked at the water quality data for your lakes and seen that the salt, or the chloride concentration, salt is contains chloride. That's really what we're worried about. Salt has been is increasing in our waters, and that's not good for our lakes for a number of reasons. So we are supportive of this, and we'll keep you posted on this one. Okay. And then take a quick drink here. There's a handful of bills that deal with cyanobacteria in one way or another. And I first, before I dive into these bills, just want to say congratulations to the lake community throughout the state, to you on this call. We have really raised awareness about cyanobacteria and the threats that it's posing to our lakes, to public health, to our property values, to the economy. And the legislature is taking notice and has, is hearing us, understands its problem. And again, we have, a handful of bills here this year that are related to cyanobacteria. Um, so House Bill 1148, adding cyanobacteria and algae blooms to the study of exotic aquatic weeds and species committee. Um, so this bill, there is already this committee that studies exotic aquatic weeds and species in the state. This committee is legislatively created. And this bill is simply adding cyanobacteria to what that committee can meet about and discuss and try to make recommendations on how the state can deal with it. And we support this, and we think this is a positive um, addition to the committee. This committee already brings together a number of stakeholders, of experts. We have our very own Bria here, Arvidsson from New Hampshire Lakes, sitting on that committee, and we have DES, Fish and Game, Department of Agriculture, lake associations. This is a really good stakeholder group, Rivers. And to have that group already together and have them to also talk about cyanobacteria, we think is a positive thing. So we are supporting this. We haven't heard when it will be heard yet in public hearing, but we will be sure to let you know and ask you all to support it. Okay, House Bill 1301. This was heard today. Increasing certain mooring fees and directing such funds to the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. So, here in New Hampshire, on 8 lakes, if you want to put a mooring out there to attach your boat to it, you need to get a mooring permit on those 8 lakes. And the fee for mooring permits, I understand, is $25 annually, and it's been $25 ever since it was established back in, I heard today in testimony in the 1980s. So this bill would increase that fee from $25 to $50, with that extra additional new revenue of $25 being deposited into the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. For those of you who aren't familiar with that fund, the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund was created by the legislature 2 sessions ago, and had some initial state funding and then some federal funding to give out in grants and loans to lake associations and communities and water suppliers to implement projects to deal with cyanobacteria, in the lake, or to help prevent cyanobacteria from occurring, reducing nutrient loading in the watershed. That fund has nearly been spent with the initial funds, and there is no sustainable funding source to continually raise funds to replenish that fund. So this is New Hampshire Lake supports this, and we see this as one way to get some funding into the fund. But we also think that there are other sources of revenue that also need to be directed to help get the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund funded annually at a appropriate level. So we spoke in support of this bill today. And we think that I felt that it was well received, and we will keep you posted on that one. Okay. Another bill that was also heard today, and I neglected to say this bill here, 1301, increasing the mooring fee, It is sponsored by Representative John McDonald, who is also a lake-friendly legislator. He's from the Lakes region, the Wolfboro area, and he actually is sponsoring a number of bills this session you'll hear that are we consider lake-friendly. So another bill, HB 1477, also Representative McDonald, also heard today. Um, this bill relative to permitting and regulation of anchored seasonal floating platforms. Essentially, what this bill does is establishes a new permit program for anchored seasonal platforms. So your floating dock or your floating inflatable castle, you would need to register get a permit for that every year at $50, and 25 of that $50 fee would go to the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. The other $25 would go to the Marine Patrol to help implement this new permitting program. While we do not know on all the 1,000 approximately lakes how many anchored seasonal floating platforms there are, I believe that while this bill would cost the Department of Safety some money to hire two additional people to run this program, my gut tells me, just doing some back of the envelope number crunching, that this bill would bring in more money than would cost the department. So that's a good thing for the department to help offset any additional costs. So we do support this again because we're looking at identifying additional streams of sustainable funding to that cyanobacteria mitigation loan and grant fund. And that was heard today and well received, and actually was with a very small minor sort of housekeeping amendment. The House Resource Recreation and Development Committee recommended this bill. They went into executive session and recommended this bill ought to pass with a slight amendment. So that is good news. And the next stop for this bill will then be the full House. So this one's moving along. Another bill related to cyanobacteria. This is a Senate bill, Senate Bill 598, sponsored by Senator Mark McConkey, who is also becoming a really reliable lake-friendly legislator here, senator. This bill would set up a task force of 9 folks to basically come up with some solutions to the long-term funding issue for the Cyanobacteria Mitigation Loan and Grant Fund. And so again, we support this. The more heads that can be put together to figure out a really robust and comprehensive and multifaceted way to fund this fund is needed. So we're waiting to hear when this bill will be heard. And then another Senate bill, Senate Bill 493, relative to cyanobacteria and other water quality issues. This is a bill from prime sponsor Senator David Waters. Senator Waters is, I would call him a lake-friendly legislator. I would call him an environmentally friendly legislator. He's been around for a while and is really, really dedicated to protecting our environment. What would this bill do? So this is essentially enabling legislation to allow village districts to be formed by vote to engage in cyanobacteria mitigation and water quality protection. Okay, that was a lot of words, a lot of jargon, but essentially, some of you on this call may be familiar with what a village district is. It is a special form, single-purpose form of government. The reason why we think this bill is so important, and the past 2 sessions, we've worked to try to get a form of this bill passed, again with Representative Dan Wolf, who's on the call. This was his bill a couple of years ago. And we got close with this. We didn't quite get it out of the House. We're starting it now in the Senate. Sometimes if a bill starts in the Senate, Senate sometimes carries a little bit more weight. If it gets passed through the Senate, it might get through the House a little easier. But this bill essentially is important because think about lakes, say Lake Winnipesaukee. How many? There's 8 or 9 municipalities around Lake Winnipesaukee. And what this bill would allow is allow those municipalities around the lake to establish, um, an area, sort of a district going around the lake, a village district that is dedicated just to water quality protection and improvement. So it would make it much easier for in that area around the entire lake, crossing those municipal boundaries for all of those that entire district to have same ordinances, same water quality ordinances, would allow that district around the lake to work as sort of a political unit to raise funds, go for grants, expend funds on lake management and protection. It would just make lake management protection and raising revenue and sharing expenses in that around that entire lake easier than what's currently happening. For those of you on the call who are on a lake that has many, for example, Lake Sunapee, for example, they were working to get a septic or health ordinance passed around the lake, and they had to go to each of the various four towns to sort of recreate the wheel in each of those four towns around the lake. So this would help a village district that crosses municipal boundaries would just make it more efficient. This is just enabling legislation. It just allows for village districts to be formed. It doesn't say they have to be formed to help protect lakes. It enables votes to be taken to see if, that part of the town is going to go into this village district. And so we are supporting it, and we haven't heard when it will be heard yet, but this is definitely one of the ones where we're going to want folks to weigh in, especially folks on lakes in which it's surrounded by more than one municipality. Okay. So we're again into the shoreland type protection type bills. House Bill 1540, establishing uniform requirements for accessory dwelling units and providing municipalities with authority and guidance for zoning, permitting, and environmental protections. That's a lot of words too. This is a bill that New Hampshire Lakes, some folks on our Public Policy and Advocacy Committee, some board members, and worked closely with a handful of legislators over the summer. We are supporting this bill. If you've been reading the news or if you were paying attention to the legislative session last year, here in New Hampshire, we have a housing problem. We don't have enough housing. We don't have enough affordable housing. New Hampshire Lakes acknowledges that that is a real issue, and people need to come together to figure out that issue. One of the things that was passed during the last legislative session is something that forget exactly the bill number, but essentially it allows people to have ADUs, accessory dwelling units, on their property by right. So this bill here tries is sort of rolling back that ability, rolling back that mandate that everyone should have the ability to build it or have an accessory dwelling unit on their property, rolls that back for just the shoreland protection area. So the 250 feet around our lakes, around our major rivers. We're going back to this 2024 when towns could make the decision whether or not they were going to allow these attached accessory dwelling units in the protected shoreland area and how they would permit those or how they would allow those. So essentially, it's just rolling back accessory dwelling units by right to, again, allowing the towns to decide whether or not they're going to allow them and how they're going to allow them. And the reason that we feel that this is an important bill for our lakes is that, in that 250 feet of our lakes, any additional development really needs to be carefully looked at and managed in a lake-friendly way. And so, if there are additional units, dwelling units within that area near the lake, we're going to expect some adverse environmental impacts. So we just want to restore the town's ability to be able to have some say in that. So we support this. This bill is going to be heard next week, and you will be receiving an advocacy alert, those of you who get our e-news, this Friday with more information about this bill and how to weigh in on it. So more to come on that. Okay, this is a bill. Representative Allison Knabb reached out to us and asked us to engage our community in supporting this bill. So House Bill 1614, restricting the use of coal tar-based sealant products containing levels of I'm going to call them PAHs. And this is basically using coal tar, to seal your driveway. And this bill would restrict the use of that product, those types of products. Why? Because they're toxic. They erode and leach off of the driveway. They get into the groundwater, surface water. Eventually, they make their way into lakes and streams and can impact the aquatic food web. We are supporting this bill, and there are alternatives to other ways to care for your driveway that don't involve these coal tar-based products. And Bria on my team and her Lake Smart team can provide information, and we will be providing information on alternative ways to care for your driveway and your parking areas that don't involve these products. So we support this bill. There are alternatives available, and it's just not necessary to use these products and, impact the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, two other bills. I'm just going to do a time check here, Erin. Okay. Um, House Bill 1431. This bill was heard yesterday. Another bill from Representative John McDonald out of the Lakes region. These pesticides, I'm just going to refer to them as neonics. These are pesticides that are widely used. I'm learning more and more about these, but are widely used and are worldwide and are creating, they're impacting our aquatic insects, the insects in our waters. They're threatening our pollinators. And so this bill seeks to basically restrict the use of these pesticides so that only people who are trained how to use them can use them. So basically, you wouldn't be able to purchase these off the shelf when you go to Target or some other store, Home Depot. And again, we're concerned about these products because they contaminate surface waters. They can harm aquatic life. They can harm the basically alter the food web in ways that could actually favor cyanobacteria to grow and take over. So we are supportive of this bill. I don't know. Um, there was a very, very long hearing yesterday, just to give you an idea. You ran over more than an hour and a half of discussion about this bill. Basically, I think that in the room that there was agreement that these neonics are not good for the environment. They're not good for water quality. But then there were some questions and maybe not full agreement on exactly how they should be restricted or regulated. So more to come on that. Thank you to, we had about 100 Lake people from our community sign in online in favor of this bill. So thank you to those of you on the call who signed in on this one. Also heard yesterday, similar topic, House Bill 1086, prohibiting the sale of certain agricultural seeds treated with these neonics, also from Representative John McDonald. And so, again, we keep learning more and more about these products, but we understand that these products are also applied to seeds. So this is more in agriculture. And the product actually, and you can see in this diagram here, a lot of the product actually washes off the seed. and then gets washed into the groundwater and surface water. And again, that the concern about getting into the aquatic environment and the aquatic food web. We support this bill. I talked to Representative John McDonald today in the hallway at the Legislative Office Building, and there was a lot of discussion on this bill, I understand, and he's trying to work with the agriculture sector to make this bill work for everyone. But there's more to come on this. I'm not exactly sure where this bill is going to land. Okay, where are we going here? Okay, and I believe I have two more bills to discuss here. So those are a handful of bills that I just discussed that we are in support of. Now there are two bills that we're currently not supporting for various reasons. And this first one, House Bill 1655, establishing a funding source for maintaining state-owned dams. This is sponsored by Representative Will Darby, again, one of our lake-friendly legislators. We really appreciate Representative Darby and other legislators who have been studying the dam funding issue over the years. For those of you who don't know, New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire, I believe, is responsible for maintaining something like 280 odd dams, which is a whole heck of a lot for a state agency. And a lot of our dams here in New Hampshire are pretty darn old and are in need of maintenance and care and are hazardous. And we have here in New Hampshire, we have a funding gap. The department does not have enough funding to maintain those dams on a routine basis, and we risk dams not being maintained properly and perhaps failing and creating property damage and potentially causing loss of life. So for the past, my goodness, 20 some odd years, the legislature periodically tries to figure out how we can raise more funding for dams to dam maintenance. This bill here proposes to assess a $100 annual fee on property with direct waterfront access. So properties on a lake where there's a state-owned dam. And if you have deeded access to the shoreline on a lake with a state-owned dam, you would be assessed a $50 annual fee. The department did the math. This could generate about 3 million annually, while the department says about 16 million is needed annually to adequately fund the dam department to do the maintenance that's needed. We are presently opposed to this bill. We do agree that there is funding that needs to be identified to fill this $16 million gap. But we would like to see a comprehensive funding solution that, raises the entire 16 million and extends beyond, a shoreline fee. Um, you know, I I would say that the boater people who register their boats in New Hampshire just had a $5 additional fee added to their boat registration for the dam maintenance fund. So boaters are now paying into this, and we'd like to see a more comprehensive solution found that more stakeholders are also paying into this fund. We know that, yes, shoreline property owners certainly benefit from a dam, a state-owned dam on their water body, but we feel that others benefit as well. And we'd like to see more study be done on this. So this is being heard next week, and you'll get more information from me at the end of this week about this bill and our position and how you can share your opinion on the bill. But again, we absolutely believe this problem needs to be solved, and we think that many different stakeholders should be part of the solution, not just the boaters and those that live right around the lake. And this bill here, House Bill 1649, prohibiting certain tax dollars from being donated to nonprofit organizations. This is a bill I learned about and then reached out to Representative Lori Ball. We're concerned about this bill because it could jeopardize funds that towns donate to local lake associations and also to New Hampshire lakes. for example, for the Lake Coast program, to do water quality management and restoration and invasive species management and prevention programs. I reached out to Representative Ball and we had some discussions, and I understand that the intent behind this bill is just to provide some transparency and accountability for when taxpayer money is given to nonprofits. And this bill would restrict direct financial donations to nonprofits from local government budgets, but it allows for two exceptions. Towns can give to nonprofits through competitive grants. So, like the nonprofit would have to apply to a grant to get funds from the town, or they would have to go through a sort of a bidding contract process. And for those of you who are involved in your local lake association or your municipality, you know that getting money from the town to support, pay for part of your association's water quality testing or to help provide more payroll for Lake Coast time at the ramp is really not conducive to go through a competitive grant process or coming up with this big bidding contract and bids. So we're trying to work with Representative Ball to come up with a third sort of exception that would work for lake associations and other nonprofits that get this support from towns. So we're presently opposed, but stay tuned as we learn more and hopefully negotiate some sort of amendment. And we don't know when this bill is going to be heard yet, but we'll keep you posted. Okay, so that was a lot of bills. This is the tracking sheet that I referenced where we're going to track that all for you. And do a quick time check. Got just a few minutes left here. So those are all the bills. What can you do? What can you do to make your opinion heard on these bills? So how can you give your lake and all of our lakes a voice in the legislature? And I would say, as I've said before, if you're not receiving our advocacy alerts, please sign up for them. Our next one should be going out this Friday about, kind of summarizing what happened this week and what's next happening next week and what you can do next week. I encourage you all, and you see this in our advocacy alerts. We let you know what bills are coming up. We recommend a position for you to take, and then very simply, we lay it out step by step how you can go in online to the general court website, the website of the legislature, and find the bill and register your support or opposition, and then share your story. I cannot stress enough. The legislators, they like to hear from me, but they really want to hear from you, the people that live around the lakes, and really understand what's going on. So weighing in online, sharing your story online, is really helpful. This is just more of what the form looks like when you're signing in online. And then what's even more impactful is to come to a hearing. Just coming to a hearing, and again, we give you information on when, where that hearing is, showing up and signing in at the hearing on this blue sheet of paper, at least for the House, this blue sheet of paper saying, here's who I am and here's my position on the bill. They take a look at that. I would say I was very pleased today at the House, our Resource Recreation and Development Committee, after every single bill, they read how many people signed in online, how many people online were in support, how many were opposed. And then they took the blue sheet, the people signing in at the hearing, and they said how many people here, are in support, how many are opposed. So you can attend the hearing and just show up, or you can attend the hearing and speak and share your story. And I would say, if you have any interest in testifying, just do it. It's 3 minutes. You basically say you'd like 3 minutes, and then you just say who you are. You thank the committee for hearing you, and you say who you are, your position, what you're recommending that they do on the bill, and then you share a little story about why the bill is so important to you, or why. So it's pretty fun, actually. So with that, thank you for um, listening to, hearing out what our priorities are. We're going to keep you posted, but already this session, and we're what, 3 days into it, Bria? I think 3 days of hearings. For 6 bills, we've had anywhere between 100 and 300 people on each of those bills from our lake community signing in. I've had a couple lake advocates joining me at the hearings and a couple lake advocates testifying at the hearings already. So I will say thank you to all of you on this call. I really feel that we are building a really good rapport in the New Hampshire legislature, the lake community. We're being more and more acknowledged and respected, and representatives and senators are reaching out to us, to me and my team during the summer to work on bills. And that's all because of you all standing up and letting our elected officials know how important clean and healthy lakes are, not only to your community, but to the rest of the state. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing, maybe. And I'm going to turn this over to Aaron and Bria and Sam to see if there are any questions that folks want to have answered.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Bria's been doing a good job of kind of chiming in when she can here in the chat, and some people are giving their opinions about things that are going on that aren't directly related to the bills that you're discussing. I'm trying to remember if there was one that maybe you might have an answer to. Um, I'm not
We do
sure.
have
Bria,
one.
is there?
I would
Yeah, go
say,
ahead.
I would say if we can address Alfred's question about moorings in New Hampshire, and that
Great.
the bill in particular asks about 8 lakes and why we don't have mooring restrictions on more lakes in New Hampshire.
That is a great question, Alfred. Thank you for asking that. So originally, and I can't remember how many years ago it was, when the mooring program came out, it was established by the legislature. It applied to 5 lakes and pretty much the bigger lakes in the state. Um, and then, uh, 20 years ago, New Hampshire lakes actually got legislation passed that allowed groups to petition to get their lake added to the mooring program. So since the program was established, 3 communities have now gotten their lake added to the mooring program. And that would be Bow Lake, Pleasant Lake in Northwood, and Ossipee Lake. So if you are on a lake community that's not one of those 8 communities, and you think that there needs to be a mooring program on your lake, then you can get folks in your community together to sign a petition and request a hearing from the Department of Safety to sort of make your case about why your lake should have a mooring program. So I hope that answers the question.
Another question popped in from Patricia wondering if there's going to be anything related to wake boats on our lakes this session.
Great. Thank you for the question. There is not any wakes sports legislation this session that there, not last session, but the session before, there were 3 or 4 bills on wake surfing, wake sports, and from all those bills, nothing was passed. And I would say right now there is not a political appetite for discussing the wake sports issue. In the legislature right now. For to let you know, New Hampshire Lakes, we're working on an educational approach. We're part of a group of stakeholders, including um, the Loon Preservation Committee, some legislators, the Marine Trades Association, trying to work on an educational approach to um, addressing some of the concerns that have been brought up about wake sports. For those of you who aren't familiar with wake sports, they generate a fairly large wake relative to most other forms of recreation on our lakes. And those large wakes, um, New Hampshire Lakes is particularly concerned about those larger wakes because of the environmental impact they can have in our lakes, eroding our shore. If that sport is done in shallow water or close to shore can erode the shoreline. It can disturb the lake bottom, which introduces sediment and nutrients and could contribute to water quality degradation and cyanobacteria blooms. So that was a long answer. The short answer is no, there are no wake sports legislation this session. And again, we're trying to work on that in an educational way right now. There may be some legislation in the future, but right now we're working on an educational approach. So more to come on that educational approach.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think some people are saying maybe they'll be following up with us with more questions. We are right at
Right.
8 o'clock here, so certainly take Andrea's advice and sign up for those advocacy alerts. And if you're interested in getting more involved, don't hesitate to reach out to Andrea or Bria or Sam or really anybody on our team. We can point you in the right direction, and we would love to hear from you and have you get more involved. Andrea, thank you so much for that in-depth review of what's going on this session. It was informative for me, so I hope it was informative for the rest of you on the call tonight. And with that, I will say I think we've done it and we'll wrap it up. And thank you so much all for joining us. And thank you again, Andrea.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you to my team. And again, if you had a question that wasn't answered today, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I myself or Bria or Sam will get back to you as soon as we can. Great.
Great.
Thank you.
Good night. Good
Good
night.
night, good night, everyone.